Okay, we've been talking again about these logical fallacies, and we left off with complex questions and things along those lines, and we're going into things that are kind of related to this. And you're not going to remember this stuff. I mean, it's okay, I get it. So, but just listen to it and hear me say the words anyway, if I can say them. Non causa pro causa. Now, what does that mean? Is the next area we're going into, and that is the error of mistakenly attributing causal power to something that's not the cause. Now, let me try to say that again. It is mistakenly attributing this caused that when it didn't cause that. And science is based on not committing this error. What they do is experiments that are controlled. And by controlled, what they mean is they try to take out every variable that may cause something to go, or happen in the for what they're looking for in the experiment, and that it can only be one cause. They're going to add one chemical into a batch of chemicals and nothing else. I mean, air, anything, nothing can come in contact with. The temperature's got to be the same. They make sure all the variables are the same, because a number of different variables or one variable can change a lot. Again, the seeking, or rather the experiment is designed to get rid of all these variables except for the one. However, interestingly, the thing that so many scientists call science, which is evolution, is absolutely filled with this type of logic. These people quickly refuse creation by God, and thus immediately bringing their bias into their argument. Again, we've talked about this before, but the science is not materialism, but materialism is the philosophy that they base their science on. Materialism is the following, in short words, but materialism is that there's only the things that we can sense with our senses. That's the only things that are real. There cannot be anything beyond that. There's nothing in the outside world that actually exists if we can't sense it. Now, that's an amazing statement. We've talked about it before, but what they're doing is, of course, because the reason they do that is because that would say that, and of course they are saying, science has its limitations. And of course science has limitations. You can't experiment on God, or at least I'm not going to try it. You can't make him prove his existence. You can't prove his existence. You cannot. With the exception of, you've got a lot of faith in some miracles, but even then, people will say, well, it didn't prove anything. And I understand that it would not, because now God will show himself, he has promised to do so, to those that seek him. And I might add that promise is true. Of course, psychologists trained in materialism would poo-pah that. They would say, oh, it was what you were looking for. I can tell you, for me, it was not what I was looking for. I had rejected everything about God through my late high school, almost all my college time. I was a senior in college when I gave my life to the Lord, and he really changed me. And my prayer was not one that I expected anything to happen, because I didn't. And when I prayed, I was filled with a power and joy all of a sudden, and I was very, very depressed. And I know I'm not bipolar or schizophrenic, and neither am I. Sorry, it was a bad joke. Anyway, it happened, and it wasn't supposed to happen. And if we're going to go with what I sensed it. Oh, you imagined it. No, I sensed it. And since that time, the Lord has made himself known to my senses actually quite often, and also through miraculous prayer. But none of that can be proven via experiment. Now, we've also been talking about the King James only arguments. And again, I remind you, we're not speaking against the King James Bible. That's not what the point is, by long ways. Very grateful for the King James Bible and what it's meant to so many people. But the people that say, well, it's King James only, some of their arguments are a little on the embarrassing side, shall we say. First, I need to talk a little bit about biblical manuscripts. And this is okay. This is an okay thing for you to know. There are two types of New Testament manuscripts that people that research manuscripts in the Bible actually look at. There may be others, but these are the two main ones. One is Alexandrian, because many of the manuscripts that have been found were found close to Alexandria, Egypt. And what happened with Christianity once it went out of Israel, Palestine, is that it went west and it went east. And the eastern version is the Byzantine Empire at that time. And so the Turkey area we look at now. But the difference in them is this: for a long time, all we had was the Byzantine, and they preserved these documents. But Turkey has got a fairly high humidity, at least compared to Egypt, and the manuscripts are not as old as the ones that are in Egypt. And the reason is because Egypt, with its dry climate, preserves things. And so the oldest manuscripts that we've got of the New Testament come, and we have no complete ones, come from the Alexandrian. They are most recently discovered, and they are of the minority. We talked before that they are not the majority text, which would be Byzantine or the Turkey area. But one of the reasons that they claim, and here's where the argument gets bad, the people that are the King James only people will say, well, the reason we don't have any real old ones is because they were so popular, and of course they were only used in schools and monasteries. They were so popular, they all wore out. So that's why we don't have any really old ones. And there's the proof of that is non-existent. There's nothing in history that says that they did that. And these were copied over and over again. They claim that's why they're the majority, because they're the best ones, but they quickly became tattered and had to be thrown out because they were used so much. And according to this, the earlier manuscripts were rejected by the early church as inferior, and that's why they weren't used and didn't wear out. Now, there is absolutely no proof of any of this, but this is the argument that they've come up with. And there's really no logic. All there is some lies. And what they're doing is saying, and we all, I think, can go, wow, there could be other reasons for that than the one that you're saying, because, again, it's no proof to it. Now, I want us to look at, we're going to look at this, and again, we're looking at a lot of the way Jesus used this type of thing and how he confronted logical fallacies. So open your Bibles, please. Open to John. John chapter 9. John chapter 9. And Mrs. Davis, will you read the first 3 verses there? John 9, 1 to 3.
And as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he should be born blind? Jesus answered, It was neither that this man sinned nor his parents, but it was in order that the works of God might be displayed in him.
Okay. So what we see here is this guy's blind. This is an amazing statement. You know, I mean, I wonder if the guy could hear, and the disciples are asking, okay, Jesus, who sinned, his parents or him? Because, again, this is the way we look at things. If somebody has something like blindness happen to them at birth, somebody must have done something wrong. And that's simply not necessarily true. Jesus says that was not the cause. But now you see, again, what are they doing? They are saying this cause caused that cause. Sin has to be, is what caused this man's blindness. Now, we do know that sin in our world, this fallen world, is the cause of suffering broadly. In other words, we have a fallen world now, and that was because of Adam's sin, and then everybody else is piled onto it. But it's not specifically the cause of all sin. And we were talking about, again, non causa pro causa, and that this cause doesn't cause this cause. Jesus said, no, it's not. That's not the reason that he was born blind. Now, had he sinned? Yes. Had his parents sinned? Yes, because all have sinned. But it was not that caused the blindness. And Jesus said it's so that we can manifest the truth in him, manifest God's power there. Very closely related to this one is, and I'm going to make you say this one. Okay, everybody ready? Now I'm going to say it first, but listen to me. I was required to learn this actually. I think I was a sophomore in high school, and they made me say it, so I'm going to make you say it. Okay? You ready? Post hoc ergo propter hoc. Okay, now I know you're going, I don't want to say that, but I want you to say it. See? Post hoc ergo. Post, in other words, past. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. Okay, everybody, come on. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. And Mrs. Davis has said it thousands of times. She says it to me every day, at least once. And, well, maybe not. And what it means is, after this, therefore this. Now, it basically is the same thing as what we're talking about, that one cause causes another. Yes, but this one is more related to time. That this happened, therefore this other thing happened. And since it happened right away, we know that that's what happened. Now, I'll give you an example of that, and this is where superstitions come in to play. You're in church, sister so-and-so sneezes twice, 2 people get healed. What's the cause? Well, sister so-and-so needs to sneeze every time we're having a healing service. And that's not so. It's the way superstitions get started. Some of the weird ones that we think of is, well, a black cat ran across your path. And everybody knows that what you have to do is turn around and go another way. My dad was actually with somebody, this was back in the 60s, and they were driving somewhere together, a man that was in the church, and a black cat ran across the road, up in front of them, and the guy hit his brakes, turned around, they were going to another town, and drove the long way around rather than cross where that cat had gone to keep from having the bad luck. We get these things because the black cat ran across somebody in a wagon many years ago. The horse reared up, kicked, killed all the people in the wagon, so therefore the black cat's the problem. And from then on, I'm not saying anything right about black cats, but I'm just simply saying that this is the way that superstitions get going. And again, we will look at sin as in these verses, and that, oh, if someone is suffering, then sin must be the cause. While again, true broadly, it's not necessarily acutely. We also hear, and you will see these in science, they will, I say science, scientists or historians, they will come up and say, okay, we've got, you people have the Ten Commandments, but wait a second, the Code of Hammurabi has some of the same things that are in there, Moses copied them. There's no evidence of that, but because of the same things in it, they go, it's copied. The same thing with mythologies, that there are a lot of myths that are in the ancient mythologies in which a divine being, one of the gods, gives his life for humans. And so people have said, see, the Christians simply stole that mythology and put it into their Christianity. And again, there's no evidence of it, but because one happened before the other, therefore the one caused the other, and it's not necessarily true. And this is something, again, that each one of us need to watch out for in our own life, because it's real easy to judge somebody or to judge God. We become angry at God because of various things that we will say, God did this to me. God is not making you sick. He may allow things to happen to you, but he's not making you sick. And we will look at that and go, well, God's causing this and he's the issue, and we blame him, become bitter at the Lord. Now, another closely related argument, and this one is one that is found in evolution, is that common substance means the common source. Now, the evolutionary thought is full of this. You have DNA, worms have DNA, therefore we all came from the same source. Because the story is, if you remember, that life was formed strangely in this soup, and amino acids started, and isn't this exciting, and eventually formed a cell. This is amazingly ridiculous when you look at the complexity of a cell, or even DNA, amino acids. They claim, oh, we made amino acids in the laboratory, which is true. Very controlled experiments, and they didn't create them accidentally. They created them by plan. They put electricity through this soup, and it made amino acids. Most of the amino acids that it made spiraled in the wrong direction to make life. That was the majority of them. There were a few that they did make. The unfortunate thing, and again, nobody ever says this, is the soup that they made, and they claim this is where life started, is actually poison. And of course, it very rapidly destroyed all the amino acids that they had created. And they don't bring that part of the experiment up, that the soup that they claim would have started life was actually very poisonous to life. What they say, though, is because the original life, they claim the original one-celled animal, had DNA, and DNA now is in everything, so therefore it's a common ancestor. So again, we don't say, well, the Toyota factory built their car, and therefore Toyota must have come from a wheelbarrow somewhere because it's got a wheel. They're not related. The thing is that common substance, the only thing that common substance proves is common substance. It doesn't prove common source. The reason DNA works, and this is Dr. Lyle spoke about this. We will look at DNA, and an evolutionist looks at DNA, and the evolutionist will say, well, it's a common source. And we say, yeah, but the common source is the common creator, where it started. And now we get to, I think, kind of one of the funniest and also one of the strangest of the arguments. And you will actually hear people use this argument. It is, oh, Ms. Davis, do you have anything you wanted to bring up on what we've been talking about? I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Yeah, not right now. Just a lot of different things have been coming to
We're
mind.
about to shift gears, so why don't you go ahead and...
I was just thinking about how, materialism, like you're saying, it's the things that we can see and all of that. But Scripture says that we must come to God by faith and through faith and everything else. To see beyond what's natural, we have to have faith. And faith, again, comes by hearing, and hearing it by the word. I have great conviction of the things unseen. It's the evidence of things not seen. If we don't have faith in the things unseen, faith in God, then it's a result of us not listening to the evidence, to what he said, his words, his promises to us, that this is who I am and this is what I've done. And the more we've spent time in his word, hearing him declare who he is, the more our faith has grown and our ability to hear him speak. I say it all the time, and I think people probably go, what? The Lord said to me, or he told me this or that, because our ear gets attuned to his voice, and we're able to discern good from evil. No, that's not the Lord's voice to us, and just so much of it is built upon faith comes by hearing. Our ability to hear comes from the word. Paul spoke to, I think it's King Agrippa, and was talking and telling him about a risen Lord. And Festus, I think it was, had said, oh, you've lost your mind. He said, I'm speaking to you sound words, very sound words. And people that are naturally minded are going to not receive the things of God. God's already said that. Do I believe that's true? I need to believe it because God said it. They can't receive the things of God. They're spiritually appraised. They're revealed through the Spirit. And so it's again back to the importance of hearing his word. I thought as you were talking about Jesus and the Pharisees attributed what Jesus was doing to the devil. And, he's doing this by the works of the devil, but he wasn't doing that. And even the man that he healed, the blind man, who has sinned? This guy or his parents or whatever? And he said, no, I've come, this is about God being revealed. And the verse came to mind about he went about doing good and healing all that were oppressed of the devil, because God was with him. He was healing that blind man who was oppressed of the devil. He said it. Scripture says that's where it began. Our sin, well, did Adam sin? Yes, but where did it originate? The devil. You can be like God. That's where it originated. And Jesus came with such a focus on, it was spiritual warfare. I've come to destroy. He was manifested to destroy the works of the devil. So when they said, who sinned? And, they needed to step a little bit further back and go, wait, this was caused by the enemy. This is not. That's where it all originated. But all those things have to be, we won't know and believe without the truth of God's word. And just, and just kind of thoughts going through my mind as you were talking about the importance again of our listening to what God says. My ability to recognize the unseen realm comes through hearing his word.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the things that everything that Mrs. Davis is saying here, sadly, we often don't believe. And as she was talking, I thought of a good example. It's an old story that I tell from time to time, but a good friend of mine was a medical doctor. He was an older man at the time, retired, and he and I would get into long discussions about things. And one day, in his office, we were talking about things of the Lord. And he was nominal believer at the most at that time. And I brought up things about creation and God doing the creating, and he looked at me. You could tell he was resisting it. And he said, well, that's easy for you to believe. I thought, what? He said, see, it's harder for me to believe. And he was telling the truth here. He said, because I was trained scientifically. And so I believe evolution, and I don't believe creation. Now, what's he saying? What he heard, he believed. And no one had told him about the fallacies, and we're going to be talking more about them as we go along in evolution, macroevolution. He'd never heard of them, and but his statement, I was trained this way, so it's difficult for me to believe. I said, just a second, I was trained the same way. And eventually I came to this belief because I did the research. And I said, if I gave you a paper that showed these fallacies, would you read it? He said, yes. And so I did this paper. He told me the last time I saw him, he said, I keep that in my easy chair. When he died, I'm sure what is this in here? And he kept it, and he read it every couple of months. And he said, I was so stunned by that so many things that he did not know about how evolution doesn't hold up and how they falsify different things and all the things that we talk about here. And anyway, he was shocked. And in the same way with me, though, what happened? He says they taught him evolution and science before I could come along and talk to him about creationism. And I'm saying, well, they taught me to think first, logically. And as I began to look at the proofs of evolution, I went, wait a second, that can't work, and this can't work, and this is not right. And the more I looked into it, and it wasn't me going and reading a bunch of creation books. It was me looking at the science. That's where it started. And I was shocked at what I saw. Now, what I'm saying is that, yes, and what Mrs. Davis is saying, what you listen to, you begin to believe. And this is why schools had to throw God and the Word and prayer out of the schools. This is why communism says you can't have religion. Why? Because that religion believes there's something beyond your physical senses. And with that, I think many people in their lives, and very brilliant people, have proven that that's so. God speaks to you. Well, audibly? No, he's never spoken to me audibly. That'd be fine, I think. But he's not done so. He speaks it in a way that I suddenly, what was that voice? And it's always so opposite of what mine would be. And it's a point of wisdom and direction that I never would have thought of, or something to say. And we have countless examples of those, that I know it's not me thinking. It's not something that I came up with. And of course, their scientists would say, yeah, it was. And I'd say, no, because there is something beyond what we can measure. To me, it's a silly statement to say, well, but there's something beyond just my senses. Is it very possible that there's something beyond what I can sense? Actually, yes. But we act like, no, it's got to be. That's their science. and immediately cutting out anything belonging to God and His Word. It is what you listen to that you begin to have faith in. And when you listen to science enough, I've been around them, and you can talk intelligence to them. You can talk different points of logic and things like that. They don't hear it. One of the first examples I ever had of that was a fellow that I was a friend with, and he was all upset because of the way that some family members of his were talking about God creating things. And I thought, what is he talking about? Because he said they go about logic exactly the opposite direction. There's two kinds of logic, deductive and inductive. And he was trained only in what? Inductive. And these family members were doing deductive, and he couldn't get it. I saw it, but he didn't get it. Anyway, just to kind of come in and put an exclamation point behind what Mrs. Davis said, faith comes from hearing. It doesn't matter what you hear, that's where you're going to have the faith. All of this brings us to one of the funniest and saddest of these logical fallacies, and that is the argumentum ad ignorantium. Argumentum ad ignorantium. Now, if it sounds like the word ignorance, it is, and it sounds ignorance, and sounds ignorant, just like my English. And I've actually heard people use this, and you just kind of, oh, did you just say that? And what it is, it means the argument from ignorance. And by definition it's this. Well, something should be believed until it's proven to be false. Now, like I said, this is rather embarrassing. Another way to say it's true because it's never been proven false. Now, often the people that use this are unfortunately the people that are on our side, or at least claim to be believers in God. They will tell you, you cannot prove that God does not exist. That kind of hard to wrap your brain around in the first place with all those negatives, but you cannot prove that God does not exist. Now that hurts just thinking about it, but it's true. And so they go, see, you can't not, that's the way it works out. You can't not prove that God exists. And you can't. I mean, how are you going to experiment that? And so, but the point is that because you can't disprove it, it must be true. Now that's false. Not talking about God. But I might also point out here, and I've done, anyway, we'll talk about this as we go on. Along with this is that you can't prove a negative. You cannot prove a negative. And by that, let me explain. It's easier to verify the truth of something, proposition, than to falsify it. If we say there's gold in Alaska, it only takes 1 grain of it to verify the truth that there's gold in Alaska. But if you say there is no gold left in Alaska, that's the negative, and you have to prove that. And to do that, you have to overturn everything in Alaska to find out if there's gold there. Now, I want to bring up something here that is, and I'm going to have to read a little bit to you. But you cannot prove a negative. And I've came across 2 articles in which men that were trained in philosophy. And I need to say here, both these guys, I'm not going to talk about them a lot, but some, are a whole lot smarter than I am. And they both have a lot of PhDs and things like this, and they should have known better. Because they wrote papers showing that you can prove a negative. Now I want everybody to listen up here. And one of the things they say is that how can I get this going? I will talk about, try to get this in. I'll quote here. One cannot keep arguing from the position of a negative proof after the presentation of evidence. In other words, if you say, well, you can't prove that, and it's a negative thing, but as soon as somebody gives proof, then the argument is over. And as they continue on, this point, however, is completely lost on most creationist and intelligent design advocates who shout from the rooftops that there are no transitional fossils long after they've been repeatedly shown them. And the fact is they have not been shown all these transitional fossils. They're not there. This is amazing because, but again, the evolutionist is trained to look for evolution. And so when he looks at one tiny little thing, he'll go, aha. And we go, that's just another animal. And so many of the things that they have claimed to be transitional fossils have turned out to be false. Many of them, and we'll talk about these later, they've been falsified. I'm going to go on and read here a common saying in pseudologic. Now, let me explain something too here. Let's talk about propaganda for just a minute. One of the first things that a propagandist must do is whatever they are arguing against, or whatever group they're arguing against, you have to come up with a name for it. And then you define those people, etc., or whatever it is. Now, they use the word pseudologic, a common saying in pseudologic. And when I come up with the word pseudologic, suddenly I, the propagandist that I'm trying to make a statement about, or I'm trying to make a statement, now we've got a name of the enemy. The enemy is Jews. The enemy are Zionists. That's the word they use for them most of the time, Zionists. And they're the ones that are causing the economic problems. They are doing this. They are killing people. I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to read here, because this is one of the things, again, he puts the name in there, and then he goes on. A common saying in pseudologic is you can't prove a negative. This saying is not true. So now this guy is going to go on to prove that the saying is not true. Now I want you to listen. Please listen very much. An absence of something can be proved in various ways. Now, I will say it again. A common saying in pseudologic is you can't prove a negative. That saying is not true. An absence of something can be proved in various ways. Now, the issue is something that is called, we've heard before, equivocation. Listen to what he did. We say you can't prove a negative. And he comes up and he says, well, but the absence of something can be proved. Can you prove that something is not in a room? You open up the door, look in the room, and it's not there. The room is completely empty. You're looking for somebody. They're not there. So you just prove they're not there. But that's not a negative. That's not the negative we're talking about. If he's going to try to prove that, we would be saying, well, you can't not prove. You know what I'm saying is that what he did was he said the absence of something is the same thing as proving a negative. He changed the wording, and he changed completely everything in it, of course. And he says, or you can do it by reductio ad absurdum, which, of course, in itself is a logical fallacy. The equivocation in this thing is, anyway, he goes on. It gets pretty bad. But he continues. I want to read a little bit more. For example, in law, a party may have the burden of proving non-receipt of certain correspondence, and they bear that proof. Now, what that means is we never got a letter from them. Well, if you signed for the letter and the post office has documentation, even if you tore the letter up and burned it up, they got documentation it was delivered to you. But that's a different thing than proving a negative. And now I want you to listen to this one, and this one is embarrassing. I can't believe they actually said this. In mathematics, there are plenty of proofs of negative propositions, such as there is no largest prime number. Now that is a silly argument to say that is a statement of fact that you add another one to it anyway. The absence of something can be proved in various ways, and that is true. But the truth is that's used often in a court of law. But that is quite different than the statement, the absence of something can be proved in various ways. Even then, in law, it's not a definite proof, it's a probability. In law, remember, they will say that we proved beyond a reasonable doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt says what? It's possible. Do you understand? That's inductive logic. It's probable that this is true, but it's possible that we didn't quite turn everything over. And so anyway, the laws of math that he quoted there are actually from experiment or existence. The fact that you can add 1 to any number is a bit different than logical proof about something not being there. Now, we move along. Where's my other stuff here? I'm going to go into some of these things so that you can understand what some of these arguments from ignorance are. And I've got this pamphlet. I won't say what it is, but I want you to listen to this statement. This is from King James Only people. And he makes the following statement. You got to get ready for this. This is one sentence. God wrote only one Bible, and no man can prove that this is not the New Testament God wrote according to 2 Peter 1:21. Now, that is extremely ignorant sounding because it's an argument from ignorance. You can't not prove that. And so many things are put in there that are illogical, that do not fit. God wrote only one Bible. Well, okay, but God didn't write a Bible. God dictated, and mankind wrote it down. And it's gone through various translations, etc. And because of that, there are different changes, but again, they're very, very small. God has preserved it in its main thrust by a long ways. He's done that.